Families weren't together last Thanksgiving because of the pandemic, and now it's going to cost families more to be together. The gas, many shelves are empty at the grocery stores. I know in Michigan it's much worse than I've seen in other parts of the country where I live, and people are really being impacted on this tax on working Americans, which is inflation.
Yeah, it's interesting because the White House at first kept saying that, oh, this is, we're not it's anything would be just transitionary. It's just not, this is going to be a temporary thing. It's not going to be permanent. Now it looks like, at least for so long as probably Joe Biden's in the White House, it will be permanent. But the White House is finally pivoting kind of their messaging. But there's still so much behind the ball. I don't know if that's even going to help them because of that stuff like this. I mean, what is behind their decision to finally acknowledge the economic reality here, you think?
I think they've been forced to acknowledge it. I mean, the Biden administration is always behind the American people. They refuse to acknowledge the failure in Afghanistan. They refuse to acknowledge that parents have a right to say what's going on in their kids' school. And then now they're refusing to acknowledge inflation. This is being forced upon them. The only way they acknowledge things is if it's forced upon them. And every single media outlet, every single financial, expert is calling out that we are in an inflationary period. We have a supply chain issue. We have a labor shortage. This is not just manufactured either by anything other than Biden's policies. He paid people to stay out of the workforce, so employers are having to pay people more to work, and those costs are being put onto the consumer. And at the same time, that labor shortage is causing a supply chain issue. So people are paying more to get those goods because there's less of them.
I was reading, actually it was a video of him, he was giving some remarks and he was talking about oil and gas companies, and then we hear from the White House that he's raising the issue of whether or not oil and gas companies are being shady and why everything is so expensive, almost intimating that they're just overcharging people, and it has nothing to do with the fact that he's cut private leasing on federal lands or the Canadian oil from Keystone XL, or now he's targeting Line 5 up in the Great Lakes, which is hundreds of thousands of jobs. He asks OPEC to put out more, release some more from their reserves. They raise prices, and then they decide from our own reserves to release oil. But that's like if we're in, from what I understand, I mean, that's like if we're in a crunch, if we're in a world war or something like that, and we need those reserves. That's not supposed to be a substitute for producing it yourself. And then he gets out there and suggests that it's actually the oil and gas company's fault as a consequence of his policies. Is he making these policies? It just is so clueless. Rana, your reaction?
I mean, he never takes credit for anything he does. He never takes responsibility. Everything's a blame game. And the American people are just smarter than that. They know that he cut energy production. They know that he cut the Keystone pipeline. They know that he's going to cut Line 5. This is absolutely because of his policies. But what's so upsetting, Dana, is people are really hurting. And it's so sad to watch Washington and these bureaucrats turn a blind eye to families who are struggling right now to put gas in their car, to pay for groceries. This increase is really hurting families on fixed incomes. And the Democrats choose to ignore it, and it's insulting to families who are looking for relief. And you know how you get relief? Let's look at Republican governors. Of the top 20 states that have added jobs, 17 are run by Republican governors. Of the top 10 states with the lowest unemployment rates, run by Republican governors. They kept their economies open, they kept their kids in school, and they understood the true science behind COVID.
Yeah, that's true. We're talking with Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, you were mentioned a little bit earlier, the DOJ, FBI calling parents domestic terrorists, weaponizing these agencies to go after parents who speak out against CRT, and Republicans have been all over this. I know Congressman Jim Jordan was demanding answers, asking Merrick Garland this specifically. Well, now we also have the Department of Education through their Civil Rights Division looking at schools like Carroll ISD, actually my town, looking at school districts that were successful in getting pro-CRT advocates off the school board. Well, now they're saying that there's some civil rights violations. They're not telling anyone, including any congressional members, what those violations are, and they want to come in and they want to set some standards. So basically go around parents when they're successful at the ballot box and use the DOE to overstep these elections and implement CRT anyway. What can be done? What are some solutions? What can Republicans do to kind of really protect the sovereignty of these municipal elections and parents from these weaponized Biden agencies?
Well, we saw it. We saw it 2 weeks ago. I mean, it wasn't just Youngkin and New Jersey and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court race. There were school board races across the country that Republicans were winning as they're ousting these extreme Democrats. A whole group of parents have been awakened because we were on Zoom with our kids. I was one of them. We got to see what was happening in the classroom. And then the Democrat leaders had the audacity to say to us, you don't have a say in your kids' education, as we were the ones struggling with our kids, as they weren't with their friends, as they weren't getting the learning they deserved, as Democrats kept them from getting the education they deserved because they cared more about the unions than the kids. So right now, they do not have any say in telling parents we don't have a voice in our kids' education. And parents spoke up in Virginia, and they're going to be speaking up in this election across the country, from school board to Senate.
I'm so happy to see this, and this really is something to behold, this huge movement. It kind of, I think it's bigger than what the Tea Party did back in 2010, the shellacking that they gave Democrats in the House. Huge. Last question for you, talking to Ronna McDaniel, chairwoman of the RNC. This CBS poll, I was almost said ABC, it was a CBS poll, and it was showing, it was a survey of registered voters, 51 to 41 in favor of the GOP. Hasn't been this high since 1981. And I think when I was looking at some of the crosstabs about it, it really kind of showcased, the GOP is the working man's party. I wanted to get your reaction to this because it seems like the Republican Party has a huge coalition and so much potential and opportunity. I just wanted to get your response to that because that poll was amazing.
It was. It was amazing. I think it does reflect what I'm seeing across the country. I also don't want to get comfortable because we got to work hard. And the Democrats are going to do everything they can to win. So nobody feel comfortable. We've got to work hard. But we did have a huge coalition in the Youngkin race. Suburban moms came out. We saw Youngkin win with 11% of the Hispanic vote. We saw the rural vote come out. If we continue to keep putting coalitions like that together across the country, we're going to win everywhere in 2022.
Oh, that's great.
But because we're running on common sense issues, parents should have a say in the classroom. We should be fighting against inflation. We shouldn't have open borders. We shouldn't have drugs coming across our border with 100,000 deaths last year. The list goes on and on and on. And the American people are embracing the common sense policies of the Republican Party.